He gave his mistress the room that was meant for his wife, and thought the door would close before her dignity could follow him in. At 2:18 in the morning, on the 28th floor of the Astoria Vale Hotel, Emily Harper stood in the penthouse hallway with her wedding dress brushing the marble beneath her bare feet. The city glittered beyond the windows like nothing terrible could happen above it, like betrayal wore perfume and smiled under chandeliers. Her keycard was still warm in her hand. It had her name on the reservation, her initials on the welcome envelope, her favorite white roses in the entryway. This was supposed to be the bridal suite where she and Nathan Whitmore would begin the rest of their lives. Instead, when the door opened, Nathan stood there with his tie loose, his expression clean of shame, and another woman's laughter drifting from behind his shoulder. Vanessa Blake sat at the edge of the room in a white hotel robe, one leg folded beneath her, one hand resting on the card that read "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore." The card was turned face down under a glass of red wine, as if Emily's name had been something inconvenient to hide. For a moment, no one spoke. The hallway hummed softly with expensive silence. Somewhere below, a late elevator chimed. Emily looked past Nathan, past Vanessa's careful smile, past the rose petals scattered across the king-size bed, and saw her veil thrown over the back of a chair like a forgotten receipt. Nathan sighed, not with guilt, but with irritation, as if his wife had arrived too early to a scene he had not finished arranging. "Emily," he said quietly, "don't make this ugly. I have an 8 o'clock meeting downstairs, and I need tonight to stay private." Private. The word touched her colder than the air conditioning. Vanessa tilted her head and smiled, as if she had practiced the moment in a mirror. "Some women are wives," she said, soft enough to sound elegant, sharp enough to cut. "Some women are memories." Emily did not answer. Her eyes moved to the champagne bucket, the open suitcase, the monogrammed towels, the framed photograph of the hotel's founder above the writing desk. Eleanor Harper. Her grandmother. Nathan had never cared enough to ask why Emily always paused beneath that portrait. He only knew the hotel was beautiful, exclusive, useful. He did not know its bones carried her family name. When Emily did not step back, Nathan reached for the phone by the door and called security. "There's a woman causing a disturbance outside my suite," he said. "My suite." Emily heard it clearly. The lie sounded confident in his mouth. 2 guards arrived within minutes, their polished shoes stopping a few feet away when they recognized her face. Nathan mistook their hesitation for obedience. Vanessa rose and lifted Emily's veil between 2 fingers, smiling as if she were holding something already discarded. It slipped from her hand and fell into the hallway. Emily bent down slowly and picked it up, not because she wanted the marriage back, because her mother had stitched the edge by hand. Then she removed her wedding ring, placed it on the marble outside the door, and looked at Nathan for the last time as his wife. "By sunrise," she said, "you'll understand whose room this was." The elevator doors closed before Nathan could hear the sound Emily made when she finally exhaled. It was not a sob. It was smaller than that, quieter, the kind of breath a woman releases when she realizes the person she protected has become the person she needs protection from. The mirrored walls reflected her from every side, the lace of her dress, the veil folded over her arm, the empty place on her finger where a promise had lived for 3 years. As the elevator descended from the 28th floor, Emily saw every version of herself she had left behind for Nathan Whitmore. She saw herself at 27, sitting at the kitchen table of their small apartment in Denver, correcting his first investment proposal while he slept on the couch with his shoes still on. She saw herself selling her blue sedan for less than it was worth, so he could make payroll during the worst month of his first company. She saw herself in a black dress at a fundraiser in Dallas, smiling beside men who never learned her name, while Nathan introduced her only as his wife, as if that was the highest title she was allowed to keep. Back then, she had believed love meant standing behind someone until they were strong enough to stand beside you. Nathan had once held her hand outside a closed bank office and whispered, "When I win, we win." Emily had believed him because his voice shook when he said it, because he looked poor and tired and honest, because she had not yet learned that some men do not change when they become successful. They simply become large enough for their true shape to show. The first time Vanessa Blake appeared, she was not a scandal. She was a laugh at a corporate dinner, a hand resting too long on Nathan's sleeve, a woman in a silver dress who knew exactly when cameras were pointed her way. Emily remembered Nathan saying Vanessa was harmless, then useful, then unavoidable. She became the person standing beside him in business photos, the voice he answered in hallways, the name that lit his phone screen after midnight. And slowly, Emily became the woman waiting in rooms after everyone else had gone home. She had told herself marriage was patience. She had told herself ambition made people careless. She had told herself 100 soft lies because the truth would have required her to stop loving him before she was ready. The elevator reached the lobby with a gentle chime. It was almost 2:30 in the morning, and the Astoria Vale was wrapped in that polished silence only five-star hotels can afford. A night clerk looked up, saw Emily in the wedding dress, and froze with professional sympathy. Emily walked past the front desk without lowering her head. The marble floor felt cold through the thin soles of her shoes. Her bouquet, abandoned earlier near the private lounge, was still resting on a velvet chair, the white roses beginning to curl at the edges. She picked it up, not because she wanted it, but because she could not bear leaving one more piece of herself for strangers to clean away. Near the east corridor, she stopped beneath the portrait of Eleanor Harper. Her grandmother's painted eyes looked down from a gilt frame, calm, severe, patient. Nathan had passed that portrait all evening without noticing the resemblance in the chin, the cheekbones, the quiet refusal to bend. He had never asked why the hotel staff always greeted Emily with unusual warmth. He had never wondered why the bridal suite had been upgraded without charge, why the general manager had personally delivered the welcome card, why the family crest on the elevator doors matched the small gold pin Emily kept locked in her jewelry box. Nathan had loved the version of her he believed was ordinary, then punished her for being ordinary once he wanted something shinier. Emily stood there with the veil over one arm and the flowers in her hand, feeling the old grief settle into something colder, cleaner. She did not want to scream. She did not want to chase him. She wanted the truth to arrive dressed better than revenge. At the end of the corridor, a private elevator opened with a soft glow. A senior concierge stepped out, straightened immediately, and said, "Ms. Harper, the executive floor is ready for you." Emily looked once toward the elevators that led back to Nathan's suite. Then she turned away. For the first time that night, she did not feel like a wife being left behind. She felt like a name returning to its own door. The concierge did not ask why Emily was still wearing a wedding dress at 2:34 in the morning. That was the first mercy of the night. He simply held the private elevator open, lowered his eyes with quiet respect, and waited until she stepped inside. The doors closed on the lobby, on the marble staircase, on the portrait of Eleanor Harper watching from her golden frame. For 26 floors, Emily stood in silence with the wilted bouquet pressed against her ribs and the veil folded over one arm. She could still hear Nathan's voice calling her a disturbance. Not his wife. Not the woman who had built a life beside him. A disturbance. Upstairs, Nathan had already mistaken her silence for surrender. He watched the hallway empty, then shut the bridal suite door as if closing it made the truth disappear. Vanessa laughed softly behind him, asking whether Emily had always been so dramatic. Nathan poured a glass of sparkling water with a hand that looked steady because he had never understood the difference between control and arrogance. "She will cool down," he said. "Tomorrow, I signed the Astoria Vale deal, and after that she will realize what she lost." Vanessa walked to the mirror and adjusted the white robe as though the room had chosen her. She looked at the flowers, the welcome card, the silver tray with Emily's initials embossed on the envelope, and smiled at things that did not belong to her. In the hallway outside, the two security guards remained near the elevator bank longer than Nathan noticed. One of them, a former Marine named Daniel Price, looked down at the ring Emily had left on the marble. He did not touch it. Neither did the younger guard beside him. The ring sat there under the warm light, small and bright and terrible, more powerful than any accusation she could have shouted. Daniel lifted his radio and spoke quietly. "Executive floor, this is security. Ms. Harper has left 28. There is a personal item outside the suite. Requesting management instructions." The answer came after a pause. "Do not move it. Preserve the hallway camera record. General management has been notified." Down below, the private elevator opened into a corridor most guests never saw. No chandeliers, no champagne, No soft music for visitors. Just brushed steel, glass walls, and the kind of silence where decisions were made before headlines could breathe. Emily stepped out and saw the family crest etched into the conference room doors, a camellia beneath a crown, the symbol her grandmother had worn on every letter she signed. For years, Emily had kept that crest away from Nathan. She had wanted a marriage that did not kneel before money. She had wanted to be chosen without the weight of her last name. Now, with her ring cooling on the floor outside another woman's borrowed room, she understood the price of hiding her own power to protect a man's pride. A woman in a navy suit approached with a tablet held against her chest. "Ms. Harper," she said softly, "Mr. Reed is on his way. He asked that you wait in the boardroom." Emily nodded, but before entering, she turned toward the security monitor mounted near the wall. The camera showed the 28th floor hallway in. Black and white. Her ring was still there. Nathan's door was closed. The world he thought he controlled was quiet, polished, and asleep. Emily looked at the screen until her reflection appeared faintly over the image, a bride without a husband, a Harper without a mask. Then she handed the bouquet to the assistant and said, "Please keep the flowers. By morning, I want him to remember exactly where he left me." The boardroom on the executive floor was colder than the hallway, not because of the temperature, but because every surface inside it remembered authority. A long walnut table stretched beneath recessed lights. 12 leather chairs sat perfectly aligned. At the far end, behind the head seat, hung a second portrait of Eleanor Harper, not the soft version displayed in the lobby for guests, but the private one, painted in a dark suit with one hand resting over the original deed to the Astoria Vale Hotel. Emily stood in front of it with her veil over her arm and felt the strange ache of being recognized by a room before being recognized by her own husband. The assistant returned with a garment bag, a pair of low heels, and a small velvet case. "Your suite on the executive floor was prepared last week, Miss Harper," she said. "Mrs. Vale requested that it be kept available in case you needed privacy after the ceremony." Emily almost smiled at the mention of her Aunt Margaret Vale, the only person in the family who had never trusted Nathan. Margaret had once watched him speak over Emily at a charity dinner and later said, with the calm cruelty of experience, "A man who borrows your light will call it darkness when it no longer serves him." Emily had defended him then. She had said Nathan was under pressure, that he was building something, that love required patience. Now, beneath the steady eyes of her grandmother's portrait, patience felt less like love and more like a locked room she had built around herself. In the private changing room attached to the boardroom, Emily removed the wedding dress slowly, careful not to tear the lace. Her mother had paid for the fabric with money saved over 6 years from teaching music lessons in Colorado Springs. Every pearl along the bodice had been stitched by hand during quiet Sunday afternoons, when Emily still believed marriage was a door, not a mirror. She hung the dress inside the garment bag, zipped it to the top, and pressed her palm against it once. Then she opened the velvet case. Inside was the camellia pin, small and gold, the Harper family emblem set with a single pearl at the center. She had not worn it in 3 years. Nathan had once seen it in her jewelry box and asked if it was costume jewelry. Emily had laughed and said yes. It was easier than explaining that the pin had opened boardrooms before Nathan ever opened a business account. She changed into the ivory suit waiting for her, brushed the loose curls from her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red, but they were clear. Her hand was bare, but it was steady. When she returned to the boardroom, the assistant had placed 3 documents on the table: the suite reservation, the guest conduct agreement, and the investor breakfast schedule for 8 o'clock in the morning. Nathan's name appeared in bold beneath the words prospective development partner. He had been chasing the Astoria Vale expansion contract for 9 months, smiling through dinners, sending holiday gifts, pretending charm could replace character. Emily read the files without rushing. The bridal suite had been upgraded under her family privilege code. The welcome package had been issued to Emily Harper Whitmore. The access authorization allowed spouse entry only in the presence or consent of the named guest. Nathan had not broken a rule by accident. He had turned her name into a key and handed it to another woman. On the security monitor, the hallway remained still. Her ring gleamed outside the closed door like a witness waiting to be called. Emily placed the camellia pin on her lapel. Then she sat at the head of the table, where Eleanor Harper had once signed the hotel into existence, and waited for Alexander Reed to arrive. Alexander Reed arrived at 3:05 in the morning, not with noise, not with pity, but with the quiet precision of a man who had learned that power did not need to announce itself. The boardroom doors opened, and Emily looked up from the documents spread before her. He was still in his dark overcoat, his silver tie slightly loosened, rain mist clinging to the shoulders of the fabric from the drive across downtown Denver. Behind him, two legal officers stopped outside the room, waiting for permission to enter. Alexander did not look first at the wedding dress sealed inside the garment bag, or the wilted bouquet resting near the side table, or the bare place on Emily's left hand. He looked at her face, then at the camellia pin on her lapel, and bowed his head with the same respect he had offered her grandmother years ago. "Miss Harper," he said, "not Mrs. Whitmore, not the abandoned bride, not the woman Nathan had reduced to an inconvenience outside a locked door. Just her name, clean and whole." For reasons Emily could not explain, that almost undid her. She lowered her eyes to the page before her, where Nathan's signature appeared beside the special access request for the bridal suite. His handwriting was bold, impatient, leaning forward as if even ink had to make room for him. Alexander placed a folded white handkerchief beside her right hand, then sat 2 chairs away instead of taking the seat beside her. The distance was deliberate. It gave her room to breathe. "I reviewed the hallway footage," he said. "The staff followed protocol, but they should have escalated the moment your name appeared on the reservation." Emily touched the edge of the handkerchief but did not lift it. "They recognized me," she said. That was enough. Alexander's expression changed only slightly, a tightening near the eyes. "Recognition is not the same as protection." The words settled between them, soft and heavy. Emily looked toward the monitor. On the 28th floor, the hallway remained empty except for her ring. It looked impossibly small from that angle, a bright circle left behind outside a door Nathan believed was his. Alexander followed her gaze. "Would you like it collected?" Emily was quiet for a moment. "No, not yet." He did not question her. He opened the leather folder he had brought with him and slid several pages across the table. "Your grandmother placed emergency authority clauses in the family trust after the Lake Tahoe incident in 1998. They apply to any guest or prospective partner who misuses family privilege, damages the reputation of a named beneficiary, or uses access under false personal representation." Emily remembered the story in fragments from childhood. A senator, a hidden scandal, Eleanor Harper refusing to let money clean what character had broken. Her grandmother had said that hotels were not just buildings. They were witnesses. They saw who people became when they thought doors were closed. Emily read the clauses slowly. Each sentence was elegant, exact, merciless. Nathan had used her name to open the suite. He had used her marriage to upgrade the reservation. He had used her silence to make Vanessa feel chosen. Now the same system he had leaned on would answer to Emily instead. Alexander leaned back, hands folded, his voice low. "You do not need permission to take back what carries your name." Emily looked at him then, truly looked. There was no hunger in his face, no satisfaction at Nathan's fall, no attempt to become the hero of her worst night. Only steadiness, only recognition. "And the investor breakfast?" she asked. "Still scheduled for 8 o'clock, Alexander said. "Unless you withdraw the Harper vote." Outside the glass wall, the city was beginning to pale at the edges, black slowly lifting into blue. Emily thought of Nathan upstairs, sleeping in confidence, believing morning would polish everything he had done. She reached for the pen. Her hand did not shake. Emily signed the first document at 3:31 in the morning. The pen moved once across the page, and the bridal suite stopped belonging to Nathan Whitmore in every way that mattered. No raised voice followed it. No dramatic phone call. Just ink on paper, quiet as snowfall, final as a locked door. Alexander Reed watched from the far side of the table while the legal officer entered the decision into the hotel system. On the monitor near the wall, the reservation status changed from active to revoked. Emily stared at the word for a moment, surprised by how small it looked. Revoked. A marriage could rot for months, a heart could break for years, but a privilege could disappear in 1 second when the rightful name withdrew its protection. The second document waited beneath her hand. It concerned Nathan's special guest status, the private elevators, the complimentary suite upgrade, the executive lounge access, the quiet little luxuries he had accepted as proof of his own importance. Emily remembered how he had smiled at check-in when the manager greeted them by name. He had squeezed her waist and whispered, "See what happens when they know who I am." She had almost told him then. She had almost said, "They know who I am." But she had swallowed the truth because she wanted the night to be peaceful. Now peace no longer required her silence. She signed again. The legal officer cleared his throat gently. "That removes all access privileges attached to Mr. Whitmore effective immediately." Alexander nodded once. Security should proceed only with courtesy. No spectacle. No guests disturbed. Emily looked up. "No humiliation," she said. The room went still. It would have been easy to let the hotel shame him in the lobby. Easy to let whispers spread before breakfast. Easy to let Vanessa walk past strangers wearing borrowed confidence with nowhere left to hide. But Emily was not interested in becoming Nathan with better manners. Her grandmother had taught her that dignity did not need an audience to be real. "They will be escorted out privately," Alexander said. "Through the East Service Corridor if you prefer." Emily considered it, then shook her head. "No. Through the lobby. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just truthfully." The third document was the heaviest. It carried the heading Astoria Vale Expansion Partnership, and beneath it, the breakfast agenda Nathan had been chasing for nearly a year. 6 downtown properties. 2 resort conversions. A projected value of $48 million over 5 years. Nathan had spoken of it like a crown already lowering onto his head. He had told Emily not to embarrass him tonight because important people would be watching in the morning. He had not understood that the most important signature in the building was the one he had left. Crying outside his door, Emily read the withdrawal clause twice. Her name appeared as chairwoman delegate for the Harper family vote. It looked unfamiliar and ancient at the same time, as if it had been waiting beneath her married name, breathing softly, patient enough to survive neglect. She thought of the small apartment in Denver, the kitchen table covered in his invoices, the nights she ate toast for dinner so his company account would not overdraft. She thought of every time he said she would not understand business, while standing on a foundation her hands had helped pour. Then she signed. At that exact moment, the clock on the boardroom wall changed to 4 o'clock. Outside, the city was still dark, but the horizon had begun to loosen, a pale seam opening above the rooftops. Alexander closed the folder. "There is one more matter," he said. He turned the tablet toward her. The screen showed the 28th floor hallway. Her ring was still on the marble, untouched. "Before security knocks, would you like it returned?" Emily looked at the circle of gold. Once, it had meant forever. Now it looked like evidence. "No," she said softly. "Let him step over it when he leaves." At 5:12 in the morning, the knock reached the bridal suite like the first sound of judgment. Nathan opened his eyes slowly, annoyed before he was awake, believing it was room service, a mistaken clerk, some minor inconvenience that money could smooth away before breakfast. The room was dim, the curtains still drawn against the pale edge of dawn, the white roses scattered across the floor beginning to bruise at the petals. Vanessa sat up on the far side of the king-size bed, her borrowed robe pulled tightly around her shoulders, her face soft with confusion. The knock came again, measured and calm. Not desperate, not apologetic. Nathan pushed himself up, muttering about incompetence, then crossed the carpet barefoot with the confidence of a man who had never imagined a door might open to consequences. When he pulled it wide, the hallway was no longer empty. Daniel Price stood first, hands folded in front of him, eyes steady. Beside him were the night manager, a legal officer, carrying a slim black folder, and Alexander Reed in his dark overcoat, his expression as polished and unreadable as the marble under their feet. Behind them, 2 hotel staff members waited with a luggage cart, silent as witnesses. Nathan blinked once, then forced a laugh. "This had better be important," he said. "I have a meeting with your executive team in less than 3 hours." Alexander did not move. "That meeting has been withdrawn, Mr. Whitmore." The words entered the room cleanly. No one raised a voice, but the air changed. Vanessa appeared behind Nathan, her smile uncertain now, one hand hovering near the doorframe, as if the hallway itself had become unsafe to touch. "Withdrawn," Nathan repeated. "By whom?" The legal officer opened the folder. "By authority of the Harper family vote and the office of the chairwoman delegate." Your access privileges at the Astoria Vale Hotel have been revoked effective immediately. You are required to vacate the bridal suite at once. Nathan stared at the papers, then at Alexander, then passed him down the hall, where Emily's wedding ring still rested on the marble outside the door. For the first time that night, his eyes did not slide over it. They stopped there. The small circle of gold looked almost ceremonial beneath the warm hallway light, like the last quiet thing he had failed to value. "This is absurd," Nathan said, but the strength had thinned from his voice. "The suite is under my reservation." The suite was accessed through a family privilege code attached to Ms. Emily Harper, the legal officer said. "You used benefits assigned to a named guest without her consent." Vanessa's face lost color. "Emily Harper?" she whispered, as if the last name had finally become heavier than gossip. Nathan stepped into the hallway, anger flickering back because fear had nowhere else to hide. "I will sue this hotel. I will call every investor I know. Do you understand who I am?" Alexander looked at him with calm, almost tired courtesy. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore. That is precisely why this decision was made before sunrise." The night manager gestured softly toward the room. "You may collect your personal belongings. Staff will assist you. The lobby route has been arranged." Nathan looked over his shoulder at the roses, the untouched glasses, the welcome envelope stamped with Emily's initials, the room he had treated like a prize he owned. Suddenly, every luxury inside it seemed to accuse him. Vanessa backed away from the doorway, no longer elegant, no longer triumphant, just a woman standing in another person's story after the lights had come on. Nathan lowered his voice. "Where is my wife?" No one answered immediately. Then Alexander turned slightly toward the private elevator at the end of the hall. Its doors opened with a soft chime, and Emily stepped out in an ivory suit, the gold camellia pin shining over her heart. Emily stepped from the private elevator as if the hallway had been waiting for her to remember who she was. The wedding dress was gone. The trembling bride was gone. In her place stood a woman in an ivory suit, her hair swept back, her eyes clear, the small gold camellia pin on her lapel catching the first blue light of dawn. For one breath, Nathan did not recognize her. Not because her face had changed, but because the version of Emily he knew had always made herself smaller, so he could feel tall. This woman did not shrink. She walked toward him slowly, past Alexander Reed, past the legal officer, past the staff who lowered their eyes with respect that Nathan had mistaken all night for service meant for him. The hallway monitor above the private elevator shifted from the hotel crest to a quiet internal greeting. "Welcome, Ms. Emily Harper, Chairwoman Delegate, Astoria Vale Group." Vanessa read it first. Her lips parted, but nothing elegant came out. The robe she had wrapped around herself a little tighter no longer looked expensive. It looked borrowed, temporary, like everything else she had taken from a life she never understood. Nathan looked from the screen to Emily, then to the camellia pin, then to the ring on the floor between them. His voice came out lower than before. "Harper." Emily stopped a few feet away from him, close enough for him to see that her eyes were still tired, far enough for him to know he could not reach her by habit anymore. "You never told me," he said. There it was. Not apology, not shame, accusation. Even now, standing outside a suite he had lost, before a deal he no longer had, Nathan wanted her secret to be the crime instead of his betrayal. Emily looked past him into the room. The roses had fallen across the carpet. Her welcome envelope lay open on the desk. The card with her married name was still face down beneath the glass Vanessa had moved earlier. So many small insults. So many quiet thefts. Emily had once believed heartbreak arrived like thunder. Now she knew it could arrive as a room key handed to the wrong woman. "I did not tell you," she said, "because I wanted to know who you were when you thought I had nothing." The words did not rise. They did not need to. Nathan flinched as if the sentence had opened every closed door in him. Alexander spoke next, his voice formal and calm. "Mr. Whitmore, the Harper family has withdrawn support from your expansion proposal. Your access credentials have been deactivated. Your belongings will be brought downstairs, and you will be checked out without further charges beyond damages assessed by management." Nathan turned sharply. "Emily, do not do this. We can discuss it privately." She looked at him then, really looked, and remembered the man outside that bank office years ago, the one whose hand had shaken in hers, the one she had built dreams around. She did not hate him in that moment. Hatred would have required him to still matter more than her own peace. You asked for privacy when you wanted to hide me, she said. Now you are asking for privacy because you cannot hide yourself. Vanessa took a small step back into the suite, as if distance might separate her from the truth. Emily turned to the night manager. Please have my mother's veil removed from that chair and placed with my dress. The manager nodded immediately. Nathan looked toward the room, finally seeing the veil he had watched fall, the flowers he had ignored, the name he had used like a convenience. Emily bent down and picked up the ring from the marble. Nathan's face softened with desperate hope, but she did not put it on. She placed it in the legal officer's evidence envelope, sealed it with one careful press, and said, "This belongs with the record, not with me." The legal officer took the sealed envelope with both hands, and Nathan watched the ring disappear into procedure instead of reconciliation. For a moment, no one moved. The hallway felt suspended between the night he had ruined and the morning he could no longer control. Then the night manager stepped forward with quiet professionalism and asked Nathan and Vanessa to collect their belongings. There was no shouting, no flashing cameras, no scene for gossip to feed on. Only the soft roll of the luggage cart, the low murmur of staff, and the faint sound of zippers closing inside the suite where Emily's name had been turned face down beneath a glass. Vanessa came out first, dressed in the same silver evening gown from the reception, her shoes in one hand, her face stripped of its polished smile. She did not look at Emily. She looked at the floor, at the camellia crest, at anything except the woman whose life she had tried to step into like a rented dress. Nathan followed with his jacket over his arm, his hair still neat enough to pretend dignity had not already left without him. When he reached the threshold, he paused and looked back into the bridal suite. The roses were being gathered. The champagne was being removed. Emily's veil was lifted carefully from the chair by a housekeeper wearing white gloves, as if it were something sacred that had survived a fire. That was when Nathan finally understood the cruelty of his own confidence. He had not just betrayed his wife. He had done it inside a room built by her bloodline, protected by her name, and paid for by the quiet power she had hidden so he could feel loved instead of purchased. In the lobby, dawn had begun to fill the glass walls with a pale gold light. The first guests of the morning waited near the coffee bar in coats and business suits, pretending not to notice as Nathan and Vanessa were escorted across the marble. No one laughed. That made it worse. Laughter would have given him an enemy. Silence gave him a mirror. Emily stood at the top of the staircase beside Alexander Reed, not leaning on him, not needing him to hold her up. Her ivory suit caught the morning light, and the gold camellia over her heart shone like a small sun that had waited all night to rise. Nathan stopped at the bottom step. "Emily," he said, and for the first time her name sounded careful in his mouth. "We can fix this." She looked at him with the calm of a woman who had already survived the worst part. "No, Nathan. We can finish it." The words were gentle, almost kind, and that made them final. Vanessa turned away first. Nathan did not. He stood there as if waiting for the woman who used to forgive him to step out from behind the woman she had become. But Emily was no longer living behind anyone. She turned to the housekeeper carrying the veil and said, "Please send that to my mother. Tell her it was protected." Then she walked past Nathan without touching him, without lowering her eyes, without giving the ruin of his mourning the dignity of her anger. At 8 o'clock, the investors arrived to find Nathan Whitmore absent from the table and Emily Harper seated at its head, her name printed on a polished brass plaque that had been placed there before sunrise. Alexander opened the folder. The boardroom doors closed. Downstairs, the bridal suite was being cleaned for a new bride, fresh roses arranged where the old ones had wilted. Emily did not reclaim the room. She reclaimed the name on the door, the seat at the table, and the woman Nathan had mistaken for nothing until everything answered to her.